For more than 10 years, a single ancestor was a stubborn brick wall in one genealogist's family tree. They had the records, they had the theories, but they also had zero proof of where he came from. It felt like a total dead end. This ancestor's name was Thomas Miller, and he was a ghost. Then, during a casual Christmas dinner, a story that a great aunt told about a long-forgotten family rumor changed everything. That one conversation, that single clue, didn't just break the brick wall, it shattered it. It reconnected a branch of the family that had been lost for over 100 years. And this story of how a Christmas miracle solved a century-old family mystery. Today, on Trace Your New England Roots. Hello, my friends. Welcome back to our Christmas story. Every family historian has one. You know, the one ancestor who seems to defy all logic, who just appears out of thin air with no past and no paper trail. And for one researcher, that was their great-great-grandfather, Thomas Miller. His life, at least the part that could have been proven, began in 1880. And there he was there in the census, the U.S. federal census, living in a small farming community in Ohio. He was listed as being 25 years old. He was married to his wife, Sarah, and he lived there with Sarah on that farm with their first child, a 1-year-old son. And on paper, it was a start, but that's all it ever was, a start with no beginning. Where was Thomas in 1870? Where was he born? The census said Ohio, but there wasn't a single birth certificate for a Thomas Miller that fit the time frame anywhere in the state. This search went on for years, combing through county after county of vital records, just hoping for a stray document, but still there was nothing. His marriage certificate was another dead end. It had his name, it has his age, it had where he lived at the time, but the fields for his parents' names were blank. Just 2 empty lines, as if he had sprung from the earth itself. And his death certificate decades later was even more frustrating. The informant, who was his own son, apparently knew nothing about his father's origins, and under father's name and mother's name were the same heartbreaking words: unknown. It was a genealogical nightmare. An entire branch of a family tree just stopped. It was a solid, impenetrable brick wall, and the researcher banged their head against it again and again and again for over a decade. They did everything you're supposed to do. They analyzed every scrap of information they had. They researched his wife Sarah's family, hoping for a clue in their records. They searched for a letter, a diary, anything that might mention where Thomas came from. And then they traced their neighbors, applying what genealogists call the the fan club method, which is friends, associates, and then neighbors. Sometimes the people living around your ancestors hold the key. It's it's possible that they all moved from the same town in another state. Many trees were built for every single family on their census page, looking for a shared last name or a common birthplace, but still nothing. It was just more dead ends. Have you ever had a brick wall that felt this impossible, where every clue you chase just dissolves into dust? It's a special kind of frustration. You really feel so connected to these people, and yet one of them is a complete stranger. It feels like a book with the first chapter ripped out. Who was Thomas? Who was this man? What was his story before he met Sarah and started this family? The researcher had pretty much resigned himself to the idea that they would never know, figuring some mysteries just aren't meant to be solved. And that's where the story should have ended. But then came Christmas. And before we get to the miracle, it's really important to feel the sheer exhaustion of the search. Because understanding this frustration is the only way to understand the magic of what happened next. This research wasn't just some casual weekend hobby. It was a decade-long obsession. It involved countless nights spent scrolling through microfilm with eyes burning from the screen's glow. We've all been there. Subscriptions to all the major genealogies sites like Ancestry and MyHeritage or FamilySearch, you name it. They all were active, and you know how expensive this can be. It was a hunt for a ghost, and any archive that might hold him was fair game. One of the first moves was to look for spelling errors. Now, Miller is a common name, but maybe it was originally the German Müller, or maybe a census taker with terrible handwriting had just butchered it. The researcher searched for Moeller, Müller, Myler, every phonetic version imaginable. Months were spent chasing down men with similar names and ages, only to find some document that proved that they weren't the right Thomas. They may have married a different woman, died in a different state, or had parents who were very much known. Each one was a small heartbreak, just another theory to cross off a very long list. But then came DNA testing. This, it was thought, was going to be the magic bullet. The researcher tested themselves, their father was tested, and even a few cousins from the Miller line were talked into spitting in a tube and sending it off. The plan was to triangulate a way back to Thomas's roots. The result came back in a few weeks later, and with a pounding heart, the match list was opened. It was a whole new world of information. But it was also a whole new world of confusion. The matches were like faint whispers from distant cousins. None were close enough to give a clear signal. Oh, yes, there were dozens of fourth, fifth, and sixth cousins with trees branching out in 1,000 different directions. But there was no clear pattern, no group of matches that pointed back to a single Miller family from one specific place. It was just genealogical noise. Years were spent painstakingly building out the family trees of these distant DNA matches, praying to find the one common ancestor who could link them all together. It was like trying to solve a 1,000-piece puzzle with no picture on the box. All the pieces were there, yes, but there was no clue. There was no clue how they were supposed to fit. Wild theories were even entertained. Well, maybe he changed his name. People did it for all sorts of reasons. Running from the law, starting fresh after a family fight, or even just to sound more American. But without a single clue what his original name might have been, it was impossible to prove. It was like searching for a needle in a haystack. And one that you don't even know if the needle is made of metal, if it's made out of plastic, or made out of straw. The truth is, even with all the technology in the world, some brick walls just feel permanent. They're built from missing records, conflicting information, and family secrets kept for generations. The file for Thomas Miller was thick with documents that told everything about his life after 1880 and absolutely nothing about what came before. The researcher had done everything right. They'd used every tool in the genealogist's toolbox and had nothing to show for it but a deep, lingering sense of failure. Finally, the file was put away. The focus shifted to other family lines, ones that weren't so infuriatingly mysterious. The search had been given up. This scene is probably one you all know well. It was Christmas Day. The house smelled of roasted turkey and pine needles. Family was scattered all over, laughing, catching up, and telling stories. It's a time for connection, and as it turns out, for uncovering long-lost secrets. An elderly great aunt, whom we'll call her Carol, was also there. She was in her late 80s. She was the family matriarch. She was usually quiet at big family get-togethers. She preferred to just listen. She was sitting in her favorite armchair, holding a cup of tea. She was just smiling as she watched the younger generations. At some point, a cousin asked about the genealogy hobby and saw the look of frustration and asked, "You're still stuck on that old brick wall?" The researcher sighed and provided a brief summary of the 10-year failure. Yep. Thomas Miller, a man from nowhere. Born in Ohio around 1855, but there's no birth record. Parents unknown. It's like he was dropped from the sky into a field in 1880. They tried to laugh it off, but the frustration was real. But then, from across the room, Aunt Carol's head popped up. She'd been quiet all day, but she spoke with this surprising clarity. Thomas Miller? You're still looking for him? A little startled, the researcher replied, Yes, Aunt Carol, for about a decade now. She took a slow sip of her tea and looked over the rim of her cup. You know, she said, her voice soft but firm, my mother always told me that his family wasn't really Miller. That was the name his stepfather used. She used to say his real name was Donnelly. The room went silent, at least in the researcher's head. This was a new surname. After 10 years of only Miller, hearing a new name was like a lightning strike. A notebook was scrambled for, hands shaking a little. Donnelly? Aunt Carol, are you sure? She nodded slowly. Well, that's the name I remember. And there was more. My mother said there was some kind of trouble, a family fight back in Ireland. Something that made his mother leave with him. And she always said he worked on the canals as a boy before he settled down to the farm. The researcher's heart was pounding. This wasn't just a clue. It was a roadmap, a surname, Donnelly, an origin, Ireland, a specific occupation. He was a canal worker. These were the details that had never been heard before. They weren't in any record. They weren't in any document. They existed only in the memory of a woman who had passed away decades ago, a story that she had told her daughter, who was now sharing it on Christmas Day. It was classic oral history, the kind of family lore that so often gets dismissed as just a rumor. For 10 years, the focus had been only on documents, on hard evidence. The stories had been ignored. It never occurred to the researcher to properly interview their oldest relatives about these distant ancestors. They just assumed anything they knew would just be too fragmented or unreliable. And oh, were they so wrong. The rest of Christmas Day was a total blur. The researcher thanked their aunt over and over, their mind just racing with possibilities. The brick wall wasn't a wall anymore. It was a door, and Aunt Carol had just handed them the key. It felt like a scene out of a movie, a discovery so perfectly timed and so perfectly unexpected that it felt fake. But it was 100% real. That night, sleep was impossible. The ghost of Thomas Miller had a new name, Thomas Donnelly. And the hunt was back on. And armed with the name Donnelly and the phrase canal worker, the researcher felt a surge of adrenaline that they hadn't felt in years. And this wasn't a chore anymore. It was an exhilarating chase. They fired up their computer, fingers flying, and they weren't just searching for Thomas Miller. They were searching for Thomas Donnelly. That canal worker clue was everything. In fact, in the mid-19th century, Ohio was a hub of canal construction. The Ohio and the Erie Canal and the Miami and Erie Canal were massive projects that employed thousands of laborers, many of whom were poor immigrants, especially from Ireland. And this historical context, totally irrelevant when looking for a farmer named Miller, was now the entire focus of the search. The search was now narrowed. This researcher looked for a Thomas Donnelly, born around 1855, living in Ohio in counties known for canal work. And then there he was. And in the 1870 census, they found him, a 15-year-old boy named Thomas Donnelly, living in Summit County, Ohio. And what was his occupation? Canal laborer. He was in a boarding house full of other Irish immigrants, all working on the canal. His birthplace was listed as Ireland. The age was right, the job was right, even the location was right. This had to be him. But more proof was needed. Proof that this Thomas Donnelly, this Irish canal boy, was the same man who became Thomas Miller. Thomas Miller, the Ohio farmer. The researcher started digging into local records for Summit County. And this is where the real patience comes in. They went page by page through unindexed court minute books, the kind of records that aren't all online, and you just have to take the time and go through them. And then they found it. A golden ticket. It wasn't a birth certificate or a marriage license. It was a set of guardianship papers. These papers, dated 1865, were for a then 10-year-old boy named Thomas Donnelly. His mother, an Irish immigrant widow named Mary Donnelly, had passed away. The court was appointing a guardian for him, and that guardian's name was Jacob Miller. And the paper stated that Jacob Miller was Mary's brother-in-law. A few years later, in another record, it was found that Jacob Miller and his wife had officially adopted young Thomas, who then started using their last name. Thomas Donnelly became Thomas Miller. It all clicked into place. The family story was true, and Thomas's mother, turns out, had brought him over from Ireland. And after she died, he was raised by his aunt and uncle, and then took their last name, Miller. He worked on the canals as a young man to earn his keep, just like Aunt Carol had said. This family trouble back in Ireland was almost certainly the crushing poverty and famine that drove his mother to leave in the first place. He didn't change his name to hide from anything. He changed it to belong to his new family. The last piece of the puzzle was connecting him to his wife, Sarah. The researcher went back to the land records in the county where they got married. They found a deed from 1879 where Jacob Miller, Thomas's adoptive father, gifted a parcel of farmland to his beloved son, Thomas Miller. The land was right next door to the farm owned by Sarah's father. He didn't just appear out of nowhere. His new dad gave him the land that allowed him to start his own farm and his own family. He met the girl next door, and well, the rest was history. The brick wall wasn't just broken, it was obliterated. Behind it lay 3 new generations of a Donnelly family from County Cork, Ireland. The researcher found Thomas's mother, Mary's baptismal record. They found her parents' names. They found her siblings. A whole branch of a family tree that had been invisible for a century suddenly bloomed into existence. The most incredible part, though, was sharing this with the family. The researcher called Aunt Carol first. When they told her that her mother's story was true, that she had held the key the whole time, she was overcome with emotion. It was a validation of her memory and a powerful link to her own mother. The story of Thomas Donnelly, the Irish canal boy who then became Thomas Miller, is now a treasured part of that family's narrative. It's a story they tell every Christmas. A reminder that the greatest gifts aren't always wrapped in paper. Sometimes they're stories passed down through generations, just waiting for the right moment to be heard. It reconnected a family line. Well, yes, but it also reconnected them all to each other. This whole journey teaches a powerful lesson. Records and documents are only one part of the story. Our family's memories, the stories they tell around the dinner table, those are just as valuable. They are the living archives of our past. So let me ask you, what about you? What's the most unexpected clue you've ever found? Have you had a breakthrough thanks to a family story? Please be sure to participate and share your own genealogy success stories in the comments below. Do you have any stories that you would like to share? Do you have a pressing question that has you stumped? I truly enjoy the engagement and try to respond to every single comment. If stories like this resonate with you, please help the channel grow by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. And if you really loved it, consider using YouTube's new hype feature. Every like, every subscription, and every hype helps the YouTube algorithm recognize that you are enjoying my content, and it will then recommend it to other budding genealogists and family historians just like you. Help me to reach my goal of 5,000 subscribers. Finally, I'm excited to announce another way that you can support the channel. By clicking the join button, you can become a valued member of my I'm calling it my Founders Circle. I will be offering member exclusive content, such as early access to the book that I am writing. I'm also considering rolling out early access to new videos before they become available to the public. And also consider joining my Patreon. Your support will help me tremendously with the logistics of maintaining this channel and allow me to keep providing you with great content. Let's all work together this holiday season and an upcoming year to break each other's brick walls. Maybe we will each have our own Christmas miracle. This discovery was more than just facts and dates. It was the story of a life reclaimed from silence. A story of a young Irish boy's resilience, an immigrant's hope, and the love that created a new beginning. That connection to the past, once thought lost forever, was a gift. It reminds us that our own brick walls, the ones that cause so much frustration, guard stories just as profound. Your ancestor is waiting for you. Their story of survival, of love, who they were, is not truly gone. It's living and a memory tucked away in an old tale, waiting for you to ask. Now go find it. Our roots are never as far away as they seem. They're just waiting for us to listen. Thanks for watching. Until next time, this is Eric with Trace Your New England Roots, where history starts with your family. Happy holidays.